Welcome to the Rational Optimist Podcast, your weekly dose of breakthroughs and insights that should be front page news. Coming up, Stephen and I just got back from Austin, Texas. We met with the leaders of a brand new college called UATX that stands for Free Speech, Free Inquiry, and Entrepreneurship. We'll tell you all about that, plus our trip to a nuclear factory that'll soon be pumping out 100 small modular nuclear reactors a year, each of which can power a town of 10,000 homes. A lot of exciting stuff happening in Austin. I'm Dan Steinhardt. He's Stephen McBride. This is the Rational Optimist Podcast. Before we get to our trip, The Economist magazine published a new article about the dominance of the U.S. economy, and there's a line in there that's almost a throwaway, but listen to this. Average wages in America's poorest state, Mississippi, are higher than the averages in Britain, Canada, and Germany.
Yeah, it's an interesting stat, and I know we dug into this, but there was some debate around like what specifically the facts were. For me, it's less about is it a little bit less, is it a little bit more. This is more about fact. Wages in the poorest state in America are on average are the same as average wages in Britain, Canada, and Germany, which we think of as extremely rich countries. This is the Rational Optimist Podcast. I'm about to get a little bit gloomy on you, I'm afraid to say.
Before you continue, just so the Redditors don't jump on us, this is average wages. So it's not skewed by Elon Musk and Bill Gates's multi-billion-dollar fortunes, and it's Mississippi, so it's not skewed by, if there's any Mississippi billionaires, it's not skewed by them either. It's wages.
Right. It's wages. For me, this is more a story about the stagnation in Europe and Canada, I guess. I know Canada's economy has continued to grow, but more a story about stagnation outside of America. So let me show you a chart to start this. So you can see here the GDP of the Eurozone and America in 2008 and then in 2003. So the Eurozone in red and the US in blue. In 2008, 15 or so years ago, it was basically neck for neck, right? And you could see last year, America is now basically double the Eurozone economy. I'll show you one more chart before we move on. This is a chart from our friend Alex Stapp over at the Institute for Progress, who I met in San Francisco last week. You can see it says Europe is now approaching 20 years of roughly zero growth in its major economies. You can see GDP per capita in America has continued, it was $40,000 in 1990. It's now, looks like it's approaching $70,000, whereas UK, France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Greece, largely being stagnant or certainly hasn't grown as much. So for me, this is a story about stagnation in the rest of the world.
So this is more about bad on Europe than good on America for you, huh?
I think so. I mean, there's no doubt America has continued to grow, but I guess the interesting thing to ponder is why has this happened? Why has the rest of the world stagnated?
Well, The Economist has a long list of potential reasons, but I think you could basically boil it down to the fact that European economies, by and large, governments by and large, prioritize comfort and status quo instead of growth. If you want to sum it up in one sentence, that's what it is. And if you ask for examples, it's very hard to fire people in Europe. And there's a stronger social safety net in Europe, which is good in some ways, but in other ways it makes the economy way less dynamic, as we can see.
There's that, and the downstream effect of that is you just don't get that many new big companies. So there was a stat from a recent Mario Draghi report, which was something like every European company over $100 billion in market cap, none of them have been founded in the last, I think, 30 years or so. Whereas you think about America and the world's largest companies, many of them have been founded in the last 30 years. I actually read a great stat the other day. Meta, I think it has a $1.5 trillion market cap or $2 trillion, something like that. It is worth more than all the real estate in New York, the world's richest city, combined. Isn't that incredible? And then that, of course, flows into employees get stock options and that generates wealth for them and their families, and then they spend the money in the community. So it's just this big, circle of money going around, which Europe does not have.
America just has this amazing ability to pretty much completely reinvent its economy every decade or two. And it's just something Europe doesn't have. And you think they're interested in getting it back, or are they happy with their no growth?
So you have this degrowth mantra that we must pull back in order to save the environment. Peter Thiel has, he says the future must be different than the present, and he has 3 visions for the future of Europe. It's either Islamic Sharia law, it's either we're all riding around on bicycles, or it's like China AI controls everything. I think the most likely scenario is that we're just all riding around on bicycles and you can't ride a car, and your the amount of miles you can fly per year is capped. So the thing is that if you look, the Collison brothers in Ireland, or so many other examples that you don't hear about, if you are a entrepreneur that wants to get ahead, a European, and you're European, where do you go?
Denmark.
No, definitely not. Of course you go to America, and that's where you get money for your idea, you get customers for your business. So that's I think that's just going to continue happening. I mean, I don't really see how this is going to change.
All right, Contra take. Put up on the screen, please, the cover of The Economist magazine. Roll of $100 bills rocketing to the moon.
It's the $100 bills wrapped in SpaceX's Starship.
Yeah, this one makes me nervous. So our day jobs are investors, and we know a little too well that when a strong take is put on the cover of The Economist, it's usually a good idea to fade that. It's usually a good idea to go the other way. Not that the people at The Economist don't do a great job, but they're reporters. So by the time that they get around to reporting something, oftentimes the markets have already peaked and started to go the other way. So this makes me a little nervous.
Has to make you a little nervous, although I just look at where all the innovation is happening. And you go through every single little one, or whether it's AI or what's going on in nuclear, which we're going to talk about, or biotech, or you just go down the list. And in each of those cases, 90% of the startups or more is in America. And I don't really see that changing. So something dramatic would have to change, something that we cannot foresee right now, to flip this on its head. And I just think with the rules and regulations in Europe and elsewhere in the world, I'll give you an example. France, they recently passed a law that in office buildings, it's illegal to switch on the air conditioning if the temperatures are less than 78 degrees Fahrenheit. That's just a type of crazy things that you have to comply with in Europe.
Ugh.
So I don't know. I think, or I'll give you another example. So, when you click on Google and say you want directions to somewhere, you type it into Google search bar and you can do one click and you get to Google Maps. Now in Europe, going onto Google is like going to the doctor's office. You have to fill out forms and click a bunch of buttons, and essentially you can't link directly to Google Maps from Google because the European Union said it was, for antitrust reasons, anti-competitive, things like that. It just makes everyone's experience worse.
Guess that encapsulates it, huh?
All right, moving on to something more positive. Last week, or 2 weeks ago at this stage, we were in Austin, Texas to visit UATX. Why don't you tell people what we saw?
So the reason we visited UATX is because one thing we're actually not all that optimistic about is the state of college in the U.S. I think the reasons for that should be obvious to anyone who has rationally optimistic values like we do, like free speech and free inquiry and meritocracy and entrepreneurship. That stuff is not in vogue in college these days, especially at the higher levels, at the Ivy League schools. So, like good rational optimists, the folks that founded UATX aren't complaining about this. They're trying to solve it. So UATX is a new university, Austin, Texas, just took its first class of students, opened its doors like 2 months ago at this point, I believe. And it's essentially what college is supposed to be. They have a commitment written down in a constitution-like document to free speech, excellence, meritocracy, and although I don't know if this is said in the Constitution, they have a big focus on entrepreneurship, which I think is just cool.
Awesome. Yeah, we were at the college and the president Pano was telling us about their Polaris project, which is essentially each kid has to go in and work on a 4-year moonshot. So it's taking a skill, some unique interest or skill that they have, and using it to make the world a better place. So you gave us some great examples of what kids have done in just a month or two, right?
Mm-hmm. And it's not just writing. I'll give the examples, but it's not just writing about a business idea or a moonshot. It's actually getting out there, taking action, and trying to achieve it. So, again, they just took their first class 2 months ago. So these are freshmen who just entered college. One of them was able to start a new media company and secure 2 $100,000 contracts, I believe it was. Another one is trying to build skate parks around Austin in order to provide a nice place for kids and mostly males to hang out, which is kind of lacking in today's world.
So you said to me, we were at lunch with 3 of the professors and we were discussing basically police shootings and bias and religion and all those things. And you said to me when you got out of there, oh my God, if we had had that conversation in Vermont, you would have been kicked out of the restaurant, right? And I think that's what was so refreshing to us, that you could openly talk about these topics as long as you back them up with evidence, and you're able to really discuss ideas that matter instead of walking on eggshells.
Yeah, it's just talking at the end of the day. I mean, it's more of a commentary on Vermont, and I guess the people who I'm typically surrounded by, like, there's just things that you don't say and you don't talk about, and you would be like looking over your shoulder in a restaurant if you're talking about those things in many, many places. But with these Austin professors, it was just talk about the evidence, talk about the pros, talk about the cons. It's how college should be.
Yeah, totally. So I guess you can really separate college into 2 main buckets, or it has 2 main jobs. And we wrote about this in our deep dive, The Dad's Guide to College. You have the learning, right? Which is you go to college to learn some valuable skill that you can use to make money in your own life, get a job. That, I would argue, has largely been disrupted. So MIT, America's number 2 college, it has all its coursework online for free. Doesn't mean that you can get the certificate for free, but you can actually go and see what professors are teaching and course material and all that stuff. The second big job it does is the networking, right? And why do parents still write those eye-watering tuition checks to Harvard? It's the network, right? Doors swing open. You can join that elite club of alumni, and nowhere else can offer you that. No online course, nothing else. I would argue that a lot of the startup colleges over the past couple of decades have failed because they can't offer that network from day one. It's like a chicken and egg problem. Do you think UATX can solve that?
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate, the network is far, far, far more important than the education these days. Because exactly like you said, you can get the education by watching videos online. So the network's the thing. That's the undisruptible part, or it has been, of the Ivy League schools. I think UATX has essentially figured it out. So they've got 3 founders: Joe Lonsdale, who co-founded Palantir; Niall Ferguson, who's a famous historian; and Barry Weiss, who founded the Free Press, which we love and everyone should subscribe to. Cancel your New York Times subscription and subscribe to the Free Press. They are helping jumpstart the network around UATX. So when a student graduates UATX in 4 years, they've got connections to some Silicon Valley startups or some Austin startups, and they can get jobs and sort of build this network that, frankly, if a college doesn't have a network, there's kind of no point to going there. So I really think they've solved this problem. I left feeling really, really good about it.
Yeah, we learned that some students have already got a job offer from one of Austin's billionaires. So that just proves that they've solved the cold start problem for colleges. So tell me this, Dan, when your oldest son, Jack, starts looking at colleges in 11 or 12 years, UATX is going to be absolutely thriving by then. You say he gets into Harvard and he gets into UATX, what are you going to do? Push him in the right direction?
So we talked about this before we visited UATX, and I kind of said no. I would still send him to Harvard for all its problems. I've changed my mind after seeing UATX and seeing the energy and seeing how sincere everyone is about pursuing this mission and building a newer, better college. I would probably encourage him to go to UATX or try to get into UATX. Another interesting point is that a lot of the students there received offers from Ivy League schools, and they chose to go to UATX instead. So it's the cream of the crop, and they only accepted 100 students, so it's truly the cream of the crop.
Awesome. That's like the new flex. It's like get accepted to Harvard, go to UATX instead.
Exactly. What would you do with your kids?
I mean, I think for their mental health, and by that time they will have a very established network. I think you would encourage them to go to UATX, certainly, or a college like it. But if they do get into an Ivy League school, I think you just have to prepare them, right?
Yeah. The other thing with this is the UATX has been smeared. I think the word smeared is fair in the corporate media as being anti-woke, quote unquote. And when we met with the leaders, they emphasized to us that we're not anti-woke. You don't start a university to be against something. You start a university to be for something. So I believe the corporate media is kind of trying to paint them into that corner where anti-woke, half the country is automatically going to write them off when they hear that they're anti-woke because it's like dog whistle for right wing or whatever. We didn't see anything. We met with at least 10 people, right? I didn't have 1 minute from any conversation where I felt like I was talking to an anti-woke person. They're anti-censorship and they're pro-free speech. And if that lines up to being anti-woke today, then I guess it does. But that's not what the university is for. It's not a reaction to wokeness. It's something much bigger and much more grounded.
We met people from tons of countries with tons of different political beliefs and religious backgrounds and the whole lot. And it was really refreshing to be able to discuss whatever ideas you wanted, and just have this healthy environment of debate. It feels like we've kind of we've made debate illegal, or you just have to, it quickly escalates to like just arguing, and we've lost the art of the healthy debate. And it's really nice to be around people that disagree but can have civil discussions about what to do or the outcomes of things.
And the cherry on top is that Matt Ridley's How Innovation Works is required reading for the first semester students.
I was looking at the list again. I believe he's the only living author on the whole list. So that is quite, stamp of approval, let's say.
We got to get his Rational Optimist book on there.
We do.
All right. So when we were in Austin, we also stopped by Allo Atomics. It's a startup with a goal of building 100 small nuclear reactors in its factory per year. Each reactor will be able to power up to 10,000 homes. Tell us more.
I'm going to give you the required pitch on nuclear energy. So why are we talking about nuclear? Because it's the safest, densest, cleanest form of energy in the world. Okay? As you said, one of these small reactors, which, would be big enough to fit inside your house, could power 10,000 homes. And I think the amazing thing about this is the SMRs are really, really a game changer for nuclear energy. So we're always, when you think nuclear energy, you think of those big, huge cooling towers on the edge of a city with steam coming out of them. These huge things, they take 15 years to build, and I think the last power plant that was built in America down in Georgia took $30 billion. That's a really high hurdle to build a new nuclear power plant. Whereas these SMRs, as you said, the goal is to produce, eventually in a couple of years, 100 of them in a year and churn them out of a factory. So this can really kickstart nuclear energy's growth and hopefully kick off the second atomic age.
It's exciting. It's a little bit infuriating too, because progress in nuclear power has been completely stopped for the last 50 years, thanks for regulators. And we could have all this stuff already. We should have been having all this innovation all along. We could already have SMRs powering all the small cities in the U.S. I'm glad it's happening now. One of the most interesting things Matt, the CEO of Allo, told us is that what a shift there's been in the regulators. So the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, for a long time, they had anti-nuclear people staffing it. And so the way that they slowed down or stopped innovation in nuclear wasn't even an accident. They essentially did it on purpose. And that's changed. He said if you look at their org chart, there's a whole new arm dedicated to rapidly approving new safe designs, which is completely different than their default no answer that they had been given for the last many decades.
Just back to your point on innovation, you think about what SpaceX just recently achieved, catching that, whatever it was, 230-foot rocket. And then you rewind 15 years and they're blowing up rockets, and the rockets are tiny little capsules. All that innovation over that time. And as you said, we've missed that in nuclear. Like we don't have a comparison in nuclear. So this is why SMRs are incredibly exciting. So we are hopeful that the regulatory stuff is like easing up, but more so specifically about SMRs. Until now, every nuclear power plant, it was like building a stadium. It was this giant one-off bespoke project. Every single one of the 94 reactors or so in America, I think they're from 50 different designs. The great thing about SMRs is we can make them in a factory. And when you make them in a factory, you have the ability to learn. You learn how to make it better and faster and cheaper, and what design works well, and all these type of things. So I think this is really going to be like a whole new face of nuclear.
We should get an SMR expert on the show, because we're not quite experts, but my understanding is that they're truly safe as well, or they will be truly safe, where there's technology now that essentially guarantees you cannot have a nuclear meltdown.
Right.
And it's so much different. It's so much better than the old big gray nuclear power plants that we think of when we think of nuclear.
It's making the safest form of energy even safer. Hey, the other thing Matt mentioned to us was that along with the regulation change, and actually Julia DeWall, who is the founder of Antares, another SMR startup who I met in San Francisco recently, she said, you know what, the regulation stuff has been a huge drawback. The other big drawback has just been the lack of customers wanting nuclear power. And that has completely changed now that we have AI. So the largest most cash-rich, most valuable companies in the history of the world, Google, Amazon, and Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, right? They all recently signed deals to bring nuclear power online, and two of them, Google and Amazon, signed deals with small modular reactor startups to basically give them the money to develop the SMRs and speed it up. So this is a huge thing. Now you have customers that are willing to sign long-term deals for nuclear and pay 3 to 5x typical energy prices, just because that's how valuable always on clean energy is to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So, speaking of, there's really an education renaissance going on in Austin. So in addition to visiting UATX, the folks told us about a new school called Alpha School, which has built AI personalized tutors for each kid, and it basically squeezes what would usually be a 4 to 6 hour school day into 2 hours of learning with the help of AI. Tell us what's going on here.
So they leverage AI to, like you said, they essentially squeeze like the hard skills that you learn in school, reading, writing, arithmetic, I assume, into a 2 hour window. And it's not that the kids only go to school for 2 hours. They squeeze that stuff into a 2 hour window. And then the next 4 hours they spend on like soft skills like public speaking or entrepreneurship, which is just really, really cool, right? The reason this is so important and potentially groundbreaking is a long time ago, we learned about Bloom's 2 sigma problem, right? Bloom's 2 sigma problem basically states that they ran experiments where they gave one-on-one tutors to underperforming kids, and almost without exception, every single kid who got a one-on-one tutor caught up and excelled. So in other words, we know how to make sure every kid gets a great education. It takes one-on-one attention, but we don't have the manpower or the money to do that. So we get one-size-fits-all education, works for some kids get left behind. AI is the game changer. Good AI that can talk to a kid and teach them the specific way they're best at learning, help with their weaknesses, embellish their strengths. That essentially is going to solve the problem. And as far as I know, this school's on the cutting edge of it.
Yeah. Just to hone in on Bloom's 2 sigma problem, 7 weeks of one-on-one tutoring took kids from average to excellent. That's just incredible. One of the things that excites me about Alpha School is that I've asked you, like, if AI tutors got good enough, would you homeschool your kids? So they're better than any teacher you can get in America. Would you homeschool your kids? And you said, well, they still need the social skills and they still need to interact with other kids. I think this is the perfect blend. You go to a school that uses the AI tutors, but they still, for multiple hours a day, get to interact with other kids and learn all those like soft skills.
Yeah, exactly. So they have in their material, they show they took a group of 7 boys who were 2 years behind in schooling, and they applied this way of teaching using AI to enhance it to them, and they learned 4.6 times faster than the average student, and they completed 2 grade levels in 6 months.
That's incredible. That is incredible. I'm struck that I actually met Born Hobart, who writes an excellent newsletter, The Diff, and he has 2 of his kids go to this school. So right now, I believe they spent something like $10,000 per kid developing the AI. It's custom, right? And this school started, I think, all the way back in 2016, before the current wave of AI was really hot and the technology was ready. I think that this technology will be available to everyone soon. I often think back to Bloomberg, the financial news website. They recently created a custom AI model called Bloomberg GPT. And when it's stacked up against the normal ChatGPT that you and I and everyone else has access to, ChatGPT outperformed it on financial data. It beat it at its own game. And I often wonder, will there be one AI model to rule all? Will, in 2 years, ChatGPT 5 or whatever, be better than every customized AI education model?
Drill into that for a second. So you're saying the generalized AI, ChatGPT 5, for example, is better at specialized tasks than like specialized AI built to be good at those tasks?
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, because there's just so much. So in AI, bigger is better. The more data you feed into the AI, the more computing resources you train the AI on, the better it is. So there's a law that you 10x the amount of compute, you 2x. You make the model doubly better. And ChatGPT or models like it are just, they have way more data and way more resources behind them. So you'd imagine, again, they're already better than a lot of specialized models, but you'd imagine within another 2 or 3 years, they're just better than every specialized model on the planet, and they can turn your kid into a straight A student.
That's interesting and promising, because the school in Austin ain't cheap. It's $40,000 a year tuition, and it's income sensitive, so you can get some help. But I mean, for now, the fact that you need to customize an AI for each kid makes the cost high, and when the cost is high, that means the kids who are probably needed most are not the ones who are going to get it. So if you're saying that's likely to change and the costs are likely to drop down because there will be one AI to rule them all who will be great at this stuff, that sounds great, especially for the most disadvantaged kids.
Yeah, awesome. I think every parent should start playing around with this stuff for their child, especially when it's midterm breaks and during the summer and stuff. It can literally design a learning plan for your individual child based on their interests and strength and weakness. So I would encourage everyone just to play around with it. And I think this is one of the reasons I'm super excited about the future of AI and what it can hold.
So you said that to me before. Play around with what? Go on ChatGPT and like ask it to make a lesson plan to teach your kid something? Is it as simple as that?
So my daughter, I'll give you an example. So you can type into ChatGPT, or I prefer Claude. I think Anthropic's Claude is way better, and you can still access it for free up to a limit. But you can say, hey, ChatGPT, you play the role of an expert tutor. I want you to design a personalized lesson plan for my 5-year-old daughter, Aubrey. She loves Dr. Seuss books. She's a visual learner. She excels at art and English, but she struggles at math. I want you to bias the lessons towards science and technology, teach her about the values of innovation, give me some field trip options if it's during the summer. You can do all that. It will spit out a lesson plan for you. If you don't like it, you can ask it to change it. As your child completes the tasks, you can take photos and upload them to the AI, ask it to grade your child, and redesign future lessons based on the grades. So, and like, that's just incredible. Imagine telling someone 10 years ago we could do this.
Wow. Man, I hope this stuff is embraced in public schools. I can definitely see a world where the teachers' unions put a kibosh on it.
I think so, but maybe it will be up to charter schools and private schools and schools like Alpha to kind of push the envelope forward, and then hopefully more kids over time go over to these schools. Who knows?
All right, last topic for today. You went to the Roots of Progress conference in Berkeley last week. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was excellent. It was the most optimistic gathering in the in the history of the world, I think. So it was essentially 200 thinkers and doers in the progress space. Tons of great entrepreneurs. All met for a two-day gathering. The topics included, Steven Pinker, which we'll talk about, gave a really a state of the world, but there was also topics on nuclear energy and geoengineering and all these amazing things. I thought it'd be good today just to share 5 of the best charts from Steven Pinker's presentation. So you want to dive in and we'll discuss them? Let's do it. All right. So the chart number 1, I guess these are 2 charts in one. Rational optimists like us know the news, it always skews negative. Okay. And that's a very important point to know. And as these charts say, like, why is the news misleading? The news is about events. It's about stuff that does happen, and progress is mostly about stuff that doesn't happen. So you often say that the headline for the last 30 years could have been 130,000 people escape poverty today, but instead we get news of wars and famines and all these things, right?
Mm-hmm. In a way, you can't blame the news, because it's not slow, steady progress is not news. It's not new. So
imagine, as a thought experiment, imagine the newspaper or just the news only updated once every 50 years. That would completely change the news, right? Because you'd have to report on what changed.
Yeah. That's a good thought experiment.
I think the first slide here that we're showing, the quote down the bottom of the first one, the news is a systematically misleading way to understand the world. It's a really important point that just goes back to it's events, right? It's sudden things that happen. It's a plane crashing into a tower, or it's someone getting murdered. It's that's kind of what catches attention, right?
Yeah.
All right, number 2. I know a chart that we've talked about for a while. Famines. We used to always hear about them, and they've essentially been eradicated. So you can see here the number of people dying from famines has collapsed in the last 50 years or so.
That's amazing news. And my understanding is the only people who still suffer famines are essentially North Koreans. Because the reason, we should talk about the reason there's no famines. It's because we've gotten much, 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 much better at growing food on a limited amount of land, but also worldwide free markets ensures that food gets to where people need it the most quickly. Yeah. Such
a great point. Do you remember, was it 22 at this stage? Russia invaded Ukraine, and it was Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe, and people are going to starve, and we're not going to be able to make the bread and stuff. What essentially happened was that wheat and crops from other parts of the world got to where they needed to go. It completely made up for the shortfall in Ukrainian production, and that's essentially the same for a lot of like commodity goods. Maybe it's not the same, something really specialized like computer chips, but for food and basic goods, it's just globalization actually has been amazing for people.
Can you picture the headline of the New York Times? Famines have been eradicated.
Definitely not. We're gonna have to start our own news organization to do that one. And I point out something amazing about this chart as well. Famines have collapsed as the world population has exploded. Not something that Paul Ehrlich would have predicted back in his 1968 book, right? The Population Bomb.
No, to say the least. In fact, it's the exact opposite. All right, next chart. We often talk about global poverty or global inequality going down, but this is a chart of US poverty since 1967. And as you can see, we're at near all-time lows, which I think if you polled the average person, they'd probably predict this chart was going in reverse. Yeah, definitely a good trend. A little spike recently. We got to work on that, but I mean, it's absolutely headed in the right direction. This kind of stuff always makes me wonder how you measure it, because how you measure it impacts the results, and you can make data show any which way. But I don't think there's really any way to argue with the fact that poverty in the U.S. has gone way, 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 way down in the last 50 years.
Someone will fact check us on this, but I believe the measurement is to deal with they essentially say, hey, this is the average, this is the amount of money you need, and this is the average wages, or this is what the average person earns, and it's like the percent of the population below that line. I would comment that the spike down and then the recent spike back up, that was essentially we just handed out trillions of dollars during COVID and everyone got it. So that's what caused the sudden collapse. And it feels like we've gone back up a little bit, but we're still heading down.
That makes sense. So I listened to, I won't get into it because we're going to wrap up here in a minute, but Joe Lonsdale's most recent podcast on the American Optimist, he talked to a statistician and a U.S. senator who has compiled all of the income and poverty and inequality data going back to the early 1900s, and he basically shows that most of the headline economic news about poverty rising and inequality rising in the U.S., most of it's just wrong because it uses statistics that have not been compiled and sliced up correctly.
Narrative violation, huh?
Yep.
My favorite thing that Steven Pinker said during the whole talk was, we don't just have an extra life, we have an extra life compared to our ancestors. So essentially over the last 200 years, life expectancy has doubled. But just on chart number 4, we're living twice as long and we're working less than ever. So you can see the work hours in US, UK and Spain since 1870, working less than ever. Yeah, we're richer than ever.
That's good. I would think there would be more of a split between the U.S. and the European countries and how much they work, huh? Not really.
Me too. Especially Spain, all those siestas. Americans getting lazy. It's just all that, you know what it is? It's all the productivity gains. That's what it is.
Yeah.
You're doing more with less because of productivity. And the 5th and final chart here, I titled this one, Why Women Should Love Technology. So you can see the average hours per week spent on housework has gone down dramatically over the past century or so, as you've got the rise of essentially household goods, or you know, you got electricity, you got vacuum cleaners, you got washing machines, microwaves, all the things that you used to have to do manually and by hand. You have these magic machines do it all for you, which frees us all up to spend more time doing things we love, or being productive, or spending time with our family. So awesome trend.
Yeah, this is part of the reason that a lot of households in the U.S., both the parents work now, because the woman can. She doesn't have to do all of this mundane labor at home anymore.
If I asked you, what's the one machine that you would like in your house that you don't yet have, what would it be?
Like one that doesn't exist yet?
Maybe it's one that doesn't exist yet, or one that you don't have.
I think I have all the machines in my house. I don't know. What would you say?
Do you have a Roomba? You have a vacuum?
I don't have a Roomba. I have a 3-floor house though, so I would need a Roomba that could climb the stairs.
Well, this is it. This is what exactly we need: the Boston Dynamics dog with a Roomba on it.
Okay, that could truly walk around the house. I would want that. Sign me up for that if that exists.
I'm gonna out myself as a complete degrowther and tell you I don't have a dishwasher.
Reason?
I need one though. It's just they're not common in Ireland. So there you go. Dishwasher, please.
I'm sure you don't have air conditioning either.
Nowhere in Europe has air conditioning, really.
Not even a window unit?
When I moved to Abu Dhabi, it's air conditioning every day, all the time.
You don't even have window units?
Window units, no, don't exist.
Man.
But it never gets hot enough, so we're good. We have radiators and heating.
Okay, that's something, I guess. All right, let's wrap it up. Viewers, for more conversations like this, hit the subscribe button. I'll talk to you next week, Steven.
See you soon then.